Hey guys, in my last video I went over the Nova Flare units, and now it's time for the 3 new Elation units. We'll cover their best teams, how they work, and which DPS is actually better. Is it the Fox or the Wolf? Personally, I'm on Team Fox, but let's just see how it plays out. Now as for the video order, it's going to be Evanescia, Silverwolf, and then Elation MC. With that said, let's get right into it. But before I get into the teams, I actually want to go over the current status of the units, as I think this would be really important to understand. As of now, in terms of best Elation DPS, for my research, I believe the order is Evanescia, Sparksy, and lastly Silverwolf. Yeah, the beta is super whack right now. To explain this, Silverwolf at the moment actually has really solid numbers and a synergistic kit. However, it's currently impossible to fully access her kit without Elation shilling. As such, that'll either mean A, they buffer and reduce her requirements in the kits, or B, that's intentional and it's a casters to Hyacinth situation all over again. As for Evanescia, she's currently the strongest DPS of the bunch. However, she's not an Elation DPS, just DPS. Now, with that in mind, I believe there's either going to be a rework or she's just going to be the Black Swan of the Elation group. Moving on, let's get to the current teams and pull list to understand what I mean. So let's take a look at my chart. Starting with the Silverwolf battleship, she's actually Elation locked. However, she does have multiple team options to choose from. Her current best one is Sparksy and Yaoguang. However, a combination of all 3 units are currently viable. We essentially have one Remembrance variation where everyone is a DPS, and then there's the 2 Hypercarry Wolf versions. Now, regardless which option you choose, there's going to be pros and cons with each of them, with none of them being able to fully battery Silverwolf, which you'll later see what I mean. Moving on, we got Evanescia, and here you'll see what the problem is. As of now, I believe some of her best teams are a combination of either Cyrene, Sunday, Sparkle, Yaoguang, and RMC. Yeah, Cyrene being one of her best in slots is crazy work, by the way. Clearly something isn't correct though. However, there are her Elation variants. At the moment, I do believe her strongest variation is Sunday and Yaoguang. I'll have the calcs later comparing a few of the teams though. Now, there's also this Sparksy variant that I saw work, which I thought was pretty funny, but it's of course not the best. So yeah, she's either going to be one of the most universal DPSs in the game, or get adjusted during the beta. Now, it would be really cool if she keeps the flexibility, but I honestly just see her getting reworked. So with those crazy teams, let's actually talk about Evanescia. To understand her kit, it's actually really simple. Evanescia's energy cap is at 480, which normally would be a nightmare to get to if it wasn't for her kit. In her talent, her certified banger stacks is now treated as her energy, so getting 30 certified banger also gets you 30 energy, and vice versa. By the way, the banger is the number right here. Now, in her Trace 1 and 3, she gains 50% of the certified banger stacks that Elation units lose or gain. So with other Elation DPSs, we're hovering around 50 to 150 stacks, while for Evanescia, she's sitting between 300 to 1000. Now, on paper, that sounds pretty crazy, and it honestly is. I'll put a chart on the screen showing the different amounts of banger you need for a particular amp. So for other DPSs, they're getting a 2 to 3 times multiplier, while Evanescia is getting 4 to 5. Now, that in turn means she's going to deal roughly 66 to 100% more Elation damage than the other DPSs, assuming similar scaling. However, because of her kit, it's actually not that impactful. Now, all this energy is for her 480 cost ult, which she can use at intervals of 240. Think like Argenti, but it's still 2 full nukes. Not only that though, we also get an additional attack every time we generate a total of 240 banger, which applies vulnerability. So that's basically her entire kit, get banger and unleash devastating ults. So with the kit done, it's now time for math to understand why Evanescia is so weird. And it just comes down to her scalings. Looking at her skill, it deals 960% attack, which is one of the highest in the game by a wide margin. Then we got her ult, which scales from 1600% to 2160% attack scaling. For reference, Castrus's breath attack and nuke, when converted to attack percent, has a 1680% scaling. Or we could just say 2 to 3 Anaxa skills. Now, what makes this attack so strong is the talent, which increases the amount of bounces from the ult, the lower amount of enemies there are, meaning she's also very strong in single target. Now, just because she has very high attack percent multipliers doesn't mean she has to have low elation ones. However, she actually does. Looking at her talent, her skill deals 16 to 48% elation damage, while her ult ranges from 216 to 247%. By the way, the description is actually really awful and misleads you. It works just like the normal scaling, with all the bounces getting that 25% elation multiplier. Now, for reference, Yaguang's talent has a 20 to 40% scaling. Using my own Yaguang in a normal setup, my basic, aka 20% scaling, deals 34k damage. So for Evanescia, we're looking about 80 to 110k for the skill. As for the ult's 230%-ish, we now got a slightly lower multipliers than a 10 stack Sparksy basic. The Elation skill also isn't much higher and is around Yaoguang's level. Fox Teacher, the extra attack when Evanescia makes enough banger, also has fairly low scaling too. With all that said, we can now compare some raw damage amps for a few different teams. The baseline I used was Elation MC and Yaoguang. Now, comparing that to RMC Cyrene, RMC Sunday, and Sunday Yaoguang, it's clear that pure Elation is not the way to go. While Elation MC can indeed battery Evanescia with a flat 20 for every skill, Sunday's ult is literally 20% or 96 energy. As for the Cyrene and RMC variant, because true damage is not oversaturated and affects both of her damage types, it becomes one of her strongest amps. Not only that, if you can clear fast enough, Cyrene's ult gives Evanescia 480 charge, so there's also that. As you can tell, she's super flexible. Looking at the damage distribution itself, we can see how her Elation skill does less than her skill in all the variants. As such, it's currently much more valuable for Evanescia to get more turns than Elation skills. I do want to say, just watch out for overcapping on crit. She has a base of 53.7, so if you're using someone like Sunday or S1 Yaoguang, that crit rate is going to be a little high. So that was Evanescia. She's currently a tier 0 DPS, but for all the wrong reasons in my opinion. I think converting Certified Banger into energy is actually a really cool concept and has a lot of potential. However, because her Elation skillings are so low, our Banger multiplier isn't even that impactful, which really sucks in my opinion. Again, I'm not going to dwell on her current kit because I just don't see it staying. But if she does, well, you can basically use her with whatever teammates you have laying around. Next up, we got Silverwolf. This one's going to be less math and more explaining because her kit is disgustingly complicated for zero reason at all. I mean, look at this. It's an absolute word salad. Anyways, we're going to start with the talent again, or at least part of it. Silverwolf has something called hidden ranking points. Basically, just translate that to punchline. When she gets 80 punchline, she can ult, though you can store up to 160. When she does, she enters her enhanced state, which is where 99% of her damage comes from. Now, her Trace 2 and 3 solely exist to enable this mechanic. Trace 3 is pretty dookie in my opinion, but her Trace 2 is really good and vital for enabling her. Now, this synergizes perfectly with Yaoguang, who can give up to 40 stacks assuming E1. Her Elation skill is also the same. Now, it has two versions based on if she's transformed or not. Outside of her form, it does 0 damage and grants her 20 hidden ranking. Now, this means we're losing a lot of damage every time this happens, so that ult form better be worth it. Here's the skill and basic. You generally won't be using these during the fight, but it's good to know that she gains 5 punchline, with there also being a slight Elation multiplier from the talent. With all that, we can finally get to her actual kit. When she transforms, the wolf becomes immune to CC and gains 30 crit damage. Here, she can only use her enhanced basic, which after 3 times, she leaves her form. Now here's her raw basic and talent description, and as you can see, it's a lot of BS. But TLDR, when the wolf is attacking, she'll deal 160% elation damage in intervals of 40. At each interval, she triggers her talent, a premium supply mystery box. At a baseline, this mystery box deals 34% elation to all enemies, but it also triggers special effects just like Sparksy. You can either get 2 skill points, 3 punchline, or have a E1 tribute effect applied to this one single instance. Now, we're guaranteed to get 2 mystery boxes. However, we can get up to 2 extra ones, which we can do so by having 40 or 80 points of hidden ranking on Silverwolf. After we finish the 2 to 4 mystery boxes, we finish off the attack with a 60% Elation multiplier, which is split between enemies. Now, depending on how much hidden ranking Silverwolf has when she casts this attack, it'll increase her final damage by 0.3%. At 80 stacks, it's a 24% final damage increase, and at 160, it's 48%. Now, with all that, it is indeed as crazy as it sounds multiplier-wise. However, the issue lies with the final part. Silverwolf eats all of her hidden ranking points at the end of her attack. And remember how I said we need 80 to get our 2 boxes? Yeah, good luck generating 80 punchline in one rotation. Not to mention that 160 amount if you want full damage increase. Currently in a Silverwolf rotation, we're looking at 4 boxes and then maybe 2 to 3 for the other ones, meaning we lose a lot of damage. Speaking of, how much damage is her enhanced basic attack? Well, it just depends. At worst, in a single target scenario where you couldn't get enough punchline, it's 290% elation damage. However, in an AoE situation with 4 boxes, that's 920 elation damage. For comparison, it's roughly equal to 2 fully stacked Sparksy basics in this one attack. So, as you could tell, Silverwolf does have a lot of potential. However, we're currently only able to witness a fraction of her power. Now, I have no idea how we can make 80 to 160 punchline in one rotation, but if I had to assume, there's gotta be some cracked out elation sustain eventually. After that, we got her second elation skill. Here, she actually has an attack now, where it deals 200 to 1000% elation damage, which is really strong scaling and is actually on par with her enhanced basic attack in multi-target scenarios. Before we finish off Silverwolf, she does have one more mechanic. In her ult form, we know that she has these mystery boxes that deals 34% AoE elation damage. However, these aren't actually locked to her basic, but her teammates can also trigger this too. When allies use SP, there's varying chances to get a trigger. TLDR, the first trigger is a 100% chance, then 20%, 4%, and lastly 0.8%. Now, in theory, it's pretty cool and adds some synergy with Sparksy. However, I legit have no idea how 4% and a 0.8% chance would be in any way or shape practical. Perhaps if it was 100, then 20, 20, 20%, then sure. But 4 and 0.8%, yeah, let's just take their 2 mystery boxes. Now, this mechanic does reset the chances after Elation skill. This attack is pretty straightforward and there's not much to comment on. To finish off Silverwolf, I want to look at her trace. Here, she gains up to 120 elation at 4400 attack. Now, that's great and all, but that's actually really hard to hit. Even with her signature, which gives 64% attack, the build I used barely could reach 4200. Regardless, what's the damage difference? Well, surprisingly, it's actually not that big of a difference compared to Shroomy. While there's a 800 attack difference, it's only 18% less damage, which is kinda crazy. I guess the attack percent and vulnerability in the free-to-play option makes one hell of a difference. And yeah, that's solid Silverwolf. Again, I believe she currently does have a lot of synergy and a lot of potential in her kit. As for how we reach that potential, I'm not exactly sure. Now, something interesting is that in her current best team with Sparksy, Sparksy's contribution is around 30 to 40% of the team's damage as a sub DPS. Maybe that warrants some buffs, or perhaps Sparksy's just that OP, who knows. But moving on, we finally have Elation MC. For this section, it's actually going to be a bit different. Rather than kit, I'm more curious on the raw stat amps that each Elation unit provides. But for a TLDR, EMC is a single target buffer which can duplicate one Elation skill via their ult. She makes some punchline and a lot of certified banger. With that said, let's look at the raw amps that these units provide. Now, assuming a baseline of 250 crit damage, Sparksy with just her crit damage buff is a 32% amp. Yaguang with all her buffs only results in a 58% amp, while Elation MC sits around 45.3%. Now, all of this is excluding punchline or certified banger, which each of these units can create differing amounts. With that said, It's actually crazy to me how these units freaking suck in terms of amping.
Are we trash?
Kinda.
Oh.
For reference, a good support hovers around 60 to 80%, with the cracked ones, depending on the circumstances, getting up to 120%. Like, the fact for amping, Yao Guang is barely better than Elation MC is kinda crazy to me. But to finish Elation MC off, I actually want to talk about Elation skills. Currently, both Elation MC and Yao Guang functionally duplicate Elation skills. Now that's great and all, but of our 3 current DPSs, literally none of them are truly Elation skillers. Now in my original prediction video, I thought it'd be Evanescia, but no, she's just DPS, while Silverwolf just uses Elation skills to battery herself. The closest unit we have to an Elation skill DPS is freaking Sparksy, who doesn't even focus on Elation skills. So it's with that in mind, I personally believe that the rumored Himiko SP will fit into this archetype, using both Elation MC and Yao Guang's ability to duplicate these skills. Cause currently, these guys are barely even Elation units in my opinion. And yeah, that's the whole video. I hope it was a fun watch and pretty informative. If there's any future changes, I'll maybe make a video going over it. Now, my next video is an Acheron focused one, and the script's already done. Just need to make the video now. I'm probably gonna take a few days to rest and then go over comments because I have not been sleeping well recently with these 2 videos, not to mention all the Ashvale stuff. Besides that, thank you guys so much for watching and peace.